Welcome to the Only Male Cruz show, the We On Your Head podcast. Discussing topics that make you say, how and where can we improve as a society? From a Black American's perspective.
Reparations,
Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Catch this live, be ready to speak. This is a call-in show. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. Let's go to work. All right. Welcome to the Only Male Cruz show, the We On Your Head podcast. As usual, we start with 0, typically, in the audience. And it may remain as such, but guess what? It's not about the audience. It's about the content. Anyone that's in the house, if you wish to pull up, you're welcome to. Whatever you do, please share the show because this is extremely important. This topic that we're going to be discussing, the biggest thing is there is this, definitely this, man, it's hard to get started with it. All right, so what I have for you today is a podcast episode that Sandy Darity and his wife, Kirsten, I think it's Kirsten Mullen, what they have, they were a guest on this podcast, University of Wisconsin. And I mean, listen, you cannot simplify the need for reparations, the support for reparations, and anyone who, why do we have to pay it? I don't have nobody that was a slave holder. My family wasn't. We didn't own slaves. I don't own slaves. It's not fair, blah, blah, blah. Hey, you know what? They do away with all that. And rightly so. That's a good thing because this thing is getting out of hand. So I got a couple things I want to play for you first before we actually get into their situation when they really just break it down because it addresses these issues. Matter of fact, let me do this because I had I had to keep myself smooth and easy right now. So I guess before we get into all that, I know it's been a minute since I've been live. Calendar is so busy, y'all. And I don't mean that in a way that to make anyone envious. But it's just been a lot. And then the other thing is, all this stuff going on, y'all. Project 2025, situation with Donald Trump just recently talking about every illegal immigrant, if they graduate college, whether it's a 2-year degree or 4-year degree or get a PhD, they should be able to become citizens and all this kind of stuff. It's like, when are we? Black Americans don't get no priority. Shout out to Dr. Nikki Proctor Walden. Hey, it has been a while. Glad to see you. You know you're always welcome on the stage. I would love to have your input. So just let me know. Shout out to Kush in the Twitter Spaces. Let me know if you want to come up, either one of you, on YouTube or Twitter, and I'll be happy to accommodate you. I'd love to hear from both of y'all. So with that being said, so that's why I've been gone, y'all. I've just been busy. And some of this stuff is just so out of pocket. It is ridiculous. It's like just too much. It's like when are Black Americans going to get a chance? But we're down, but we're not out. So I really need to start with this Ron Daniels clip, okay? Because although I appreciate what he's trying to do, I only appreciate it if he is wrong, if he doesn't realize that he's wrong, because what he's asking for, well, I'll let y'all hear it. Let me play it for y'all so we can get that. Hopefully my folks on Twitter can hear it too. So let's go. Okay, so, and Kush, girl, listen, if you got time, if you can come up here, I'd love for you to do it. Or Dr. Nikki, if you can come up. And I hope both platforms are able to hear that. So that's Dr. Ron Daniels, apparently president of the IBW21 on Tavis Smiley's show. Um, and it's this HR 20. I mean, HR 40 is like, oh, we need this HR 40, and the hope was that Biden was going to get it signed, and not it itself, but sign some new legislation in the office that that would commit to a commission, a study, and all this kind of crap. First of all, we don't need no more study. I mean, it's plain. You have everyone else out here arguing why we don't need reparations, and let them tell it their arguments are so valid. So what the hell are we still doing studying it? Everyone has already formed an opinion. Why do we need a study now? Okay? And also, you have Elon Musk, of all people, trying to give some level of credibility to the no need for reparations. So let me see. So we need to, this asking for studies from anyone else at this point is a done deal. It ain't about a study no more. We're done with the study. Everybody's formed their opinion. So let's go ahead and let's get this legislation, cut the check. What's up, Kush? How you doing?
What's up, sis? Peace to you.
Yeah, to you.
That is so funny that you brought that up, because as I was looking on YouTube, Ron Daniels was in a reparations strategy session with NARC and for a local reparations certification in January of 2024. With all that being said, I think I remember sitting in that meeting, and long story short, it was a whole bunch of malarkey. The fact that they keep saying we need to study, there's nothing to study. It's already been proven in history. When y'all want to whitewash history and not be honest about the traumas and atrocities that they have done to Black Americans as a whole. Nobody wants to address it as a whole and just simply say, hey, look, we're going to give Black Americans reparations because they done set them with the domestic terrorism. We done sat up here and watched our kids be burned, kids being fed to alligators. The whole Oklahoma race match. Like, come on now. Like,
come on.
There's enough evidence out there to prove that Black Americans deserve the repair that's needed. Because they never kept the same energy for the Jews. They didn't keep that same energy for them $5 Indians. They didn't sit up here and keep that same energy for the Japanese. And hell, the Holocaust never happened in America.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's exactly that. And so, and like I said, I don't know who Ron Daniels is, and I don't want to disrespect anybody, but I can't agree with this ridiculousness that he's, well, Biden will give you our vote. First of all, right now, Ron, you ain't say Ron, say I will give you my vote. Ron, you say that, because we ain't going to give Biden our vote if he will commit to a study. Let's really, really, really start there. Study time is over, okay? Cut the check. Now, and this is why what he said is so dangerous, and shout out to the people on the Twitter space, Blood Pack. At some point, Blood Pack, whenever you're ready, I need you to get up, because I do want you to share that link, because, girl, you are doing big, mighty things with this farmers alignment. That's not what you call it, but you're definitely doing big, mighty things. And thing about it is, you said that's what you were going to do. So I'd love for you in this recorded space, if this space is even recorded, but definitely in this recorded space and this YouTube, I'd love for you to get up here and share those, where people can find out more about that objective that you have been so successful with. And then Muffet, if you want to come up, bro, there's always an open door on this platform for you. So there, that was the Ron Daniels situation. Okay. A shout out to Miss Trigger Trouble, the Oracle, right here in these Twitter spaces, co-host, and appreciate you so much, Trouble, for pulling up. So that was the Ron Daniels piece. Here is the thing that made me say, Mel, I know you're working 6 days a week, working your ass off. We on your head podcast, but This lady is completely out of pocket, and she sounds so believable that this cannot go unaddressed. So not only myself, but anyone else needs to be discussing this and dispelling what this lady is saying. So let me get this part set up. This lady is from the UK, and she has the audacity to, again, have an opinion on reparations, and she's trying to make it look good, like, well, see, if it wasn't for the West, we actually made it, you know, our Christianness, y'all have to hear it for yourself. I can't even repeat it. So let's just listen to it. It's about 3 minutes, but really listen to what she's saying, and then we're going to get into Darity and his he and Kirsten's phenomenal discussion. So here we go.
Demonstrates this time and time again. Rather than give a man a fish, it is always better to teach him how to fish. All giving the fish does is make the giver feel better. Reparations might relieve white people of their guilt, but it will do little else. So back to my initial question. Why are we only discussing whether the West should pay reparations for slavery? Because while slavery was common to all civilizations, only one civilization developed a moral revulsion against it, very late in its history, Western civilization. Not even the leading moralists in other civilizations rejected slavery at all. Rather than be ashamed as Westerners, we should stand proud for having led the world out of a mentality where slavery was the norm, and we should vote against this motion. Thank you.
Okay, so I just got a text, and I guess folks in the YouTube channel, were you guys able to hear that clip? It says it's working now. Okay, okay. Muffets, let me know. All right, I'm gonna have to hit that back because that. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why that wasn't playing. I tried to have it set up. Let me see. All right, I don't know why that wasn't playing. My apologies. Um, y'all in the Twitter space, were you guys able to hear that clip what this lady was talking about?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I almost want to play it back for my YouTube people. But is there anybody up here that wants to give a brief recap of what the lady said while I set that back up again? Hey, Siva. Shout out to everybody in the space on Twitter. Shout out to Sir Miguel in the house. And Muffet, you said it is working now. Yeah, is there anybody that wants to give it? Because I can give it if somebody else, unless somebody else wants to.
Well, I thought so. Brooke got a comment down there at the bottom, right? And I think it was really important for her to point that out. So shout out to Bloodpack for that. And she literally said, "Did she say 400,000 former slaves fought in the Civil War?"
Girl, I think she did. So I'm going to run it now. I'm going to run it back because I had to listen to it more than once when I was preparing for the show. But here's my big thing. Her perspective, we're going to listen to it from this perspective now. She is justifying. So she can say, oh, yeah, well, if reparations should be paid, it should be paid for the Confederate soldiers who fought to end slavery, who died trying to make slavery, be abolished. So you don't mind the concept of reparations being paid, but only if it pays you. So you can see it being reasonable to be paid, but just not towards the people where most of the harm was done to. Y'all get what I'm talking about? So let me, I'm going to try this one more again because it's just that important. And y'all let me know if, let's see, try it again. Lord, let this work. Jesus, in Jesus' name, let this work. Can y'all hear?
Slavery, as odious as it was simply a normal way of life. Arabs were extracting millions of black African slaves centuries before Christian nations did, for about 13 centuries, compared to the 3 centuries European nations ran the Atlantic slave trade. Arabs marched African slaves across the Sahara Desert, and as such, they died more often. It was customary to castrate them, and many died from this practice. The Arabs also enslaved over 1 million white European Christians. The term slavery, in fact, comes from the word Slav. The Slavs inhabited Eastern Europe and were taken by the Muslims of Spain in the 9th century. Not to mention that Africans had been enslaving each other for thousands of years. The point is that slavery, the second point is that slavery was not about race, and that's important. It was not about race. The only reason we think it's about race is because philosophers like David Hume in the 18th century ranked human beings and put Africans at the bottom, saying that they had no souls. The Enlightenment imposed the concept of race on a practice that had been going on for centuries in order to justify that practice. And why did they have to justify it? And this is the point. Because people in the West began to question slavery's moral validity. The fact is that people of all colors owned slaves, both as part of the Atlantic slave trade and outside of it. In the United States and Caribbean, black people owned thousands of black slaves, and so did the Native Americans. Nearly 20,000 of the Native American 5 civilized tribes sided with the Confederacy during the Civil War, fighting to keep slavery alive. 28% of the black population who were free in New Orleans pledged their support to the Confederacy. All of the 13 southern states of the Confederacy had substantial numbers of black slave owners. There were more than 250,000 free blacks, and nearly 4,000 of them were slave masters who owned more than 20,000 slaves. The practice of slavery was legal, after all. We need to remember that governments did not own slaves. Slave owners did. In fact, the US government fought a war to end slavery. How much should the descendants of the 400,000 Union soldiers who lost their lives fighting to free the slaves pay to the descendants of the slaves they freed. Giving people lump sums of money does not work. Economists often point to the Georgia Land Lottery of 1832, in which parcels of land were distributed randomly. What happened to the descendants of those who were lucky enough to be given this land? Are they the richest families in Georgia? No. In fact, within one generation after the distribution of the Georgia land, one could not distinguish between those who had been given land and those who hadn't. Certainly my own direct experiences of working for 20 plus years in the inner city with families on welfare demonstrates this time and time again. Rather than give a man a fish, it is always better to teach him how to fish. All giving the fish does is make the giver feel better. Reparations might relieve white people of their guilt, but it will do little else. So back to my initial question. Why are we only discussing whether the West should pay reparations for slavery? Because while slavery was common to all civilizations, only one civilization developed a moral revulsion against it, very late in its history, Western civilization. Not even the leading moralists in other civilizations rejected slavery at all. Rather than be ashamed as Westerners, we should stand proud for having led the world out of a mentality where slavery was the norm, and we should vote against this motion. Thank you.
So do you guys hear all of that spin? I mean, it's this. Go ahead, Trouble. I see you. Go ahead, girl.
That was some deep spin, and what I'm watching it on YouTube at the same time it's playing. I initially thought this was a white woman, but I think that they got the melanated proxy or someone with a little bit of a tint to them to deliver this foolishness.
Yeah.
So she justified it from a worldwide view, saying, well, and this is the common argument, right? Everyone had slaves. Yep. Oh, this group had slaves. The natives had slaves. Other black people were slaving each other. I mean, it was common. It was natural. It was a way of life.
Right.
So, and go ahead, Beth.
Well, no, that's absolutely correct because she's spinning the hell out of this, and I'm thinking that the Ron Daniels didn't play either, so I'm gonna have to pull that up shortly. But shout out to Sir Miguel who said she sounds ridiculous. Now, if I did put the entire link because this is a whole debate, a full body debate. So the link to that entire debate is in the description. But this lady does go on to say, you know, her father is, they got some melanation going on, and it's black when you want it to be black, and then when it ain't, it's not. And you're right, Trouble. That's why they pulled her, because she can play the card. And it's just simply ridiculous. But again, did anybody hear how she attempted to spin it, or what are your thoughts on the spin that she came up with about the Confederate? Not the Confederate soldiers, the soldiers, the government's. Huh?
What she was saying, it was 400,000 Union soldiers.
Yes, the Union soldiers, right. How they had gone, should they get paid? The question is, what were they doing? What were those Union soldiers doing? They were soldiers, right? Which meant they were already receiving some form of compensation. They were actually doing their job. They were actually working on behalf of the government. Okay, so to all of a sudden say that because their family wound up in, they chose to be soldiers or whatever, now all of a sudden they deserve reparations. It's not even the same thing. Okay,
it's a ridiculous argument because that means that every soldier who ever fought in any war, who's ever fought at any time, their whole family deserves some form of reparations for something that they've already gotten paid for.
Right.
Because as you stated, this is their job.
Right.
And again, she's forgetting all of the black folks who fought in that same war to free themselves.
There you go. And even if we approached it from that angle, they'd say, well, we can't do anything that's race related. We can't give a benefit for anyone that, based on skin color, et cetera, et cetera. Shout out to the people in the Twitter spaces. Feel free at any time to request a mic. Love to hear what you have to say about it. We're also live on YouTube. So if you want to come on and jump up on the stage in that regard, you're free to do that as well. Muffet on YouTube said a female lawyer representing the plaintiff mentioned a case called Richmond versus Croson, where she said it was found that the state had no duty to rectify past misdeeds. I proceeded to look Croson up. Okay, well, we'd love to know your findings, Muffet, because you be on it. We got George Middleton in the Twitter. I mean, as you were in our YouTube. The debt for reparations is still accruing. Absolutely. That is because the Europeans' ideology and social practice of race is still exploiting our people. Reparations implies that the problem is in the past, but it's not. Cut the check, but stop the behavior of racism also. Absolutely. Y'all on YouTube and on Twitter, the stage is open. Just say drop the mic and we'll get you up here. It's all up to you, whatever you choose to do. I really need to run back this Daniels guy, but it's going to take me a minute to find that link again. So I'm just going to paraphrase very briefly. Kush, I know you come up, girl, and then somehow you go down. And I wish you were still up on the stage. But Ron Daniels is essentially wanted Biden to sign or commit and sign some form of legislation to commit to a HR40 study and something else ridiculous. You want to study and you want to commission about the study to at some point determine how reparations should be paid. Listen, all of that is ridiculous. And I think at the beginning of the show, Kush and I, we were saying that, hey, it's over with. The study's done. You got people already forming arguments about why reparations isn't needed. What the hell are you trying to study? I mean, the people have already come to their conclusion. Why are we studying any damn thing at this point? And whether they came to these conclusions or not, we don't care. All right? Because the facts are what they are. So this is why we're going to be listening to Sandy Darity in this podcast episode that he and Kirsten, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, he and his wife did, because they have simplified the need for reparations to such an extent that, there is no, I think, what's my man say? It's irreducible. Okay. You can't get it any simpler than what it is. Shout out to Muffet. You said that I noticed two things about the decision that would allow opponents to legally challenge any reparations from a legal or legislative source. According to the decision, there were two things to preclude it. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to find out more about what you're talking about there, Muffet. Tata, you were in Kush's space earlier, and I think that this is a comment you made about having to start your business over twice, and you had put your money in it. Is that correct? That was you that said that? Is that right, Tata? Or Kush? That was Tata that made it.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
Mhm.
and the interesting thing about all of this is just her whole thing is, well, slavery was just natural. It was just common back in those days.
Mhm.
Listen, and which means that she'll probably push the narrative that the Three Sons Compromise was a beneficial thing as well for Black Americans when it never was a thing. It's not normal to take a human being and strip them of their rights and sell their children and have them never see their children again. It is not normal to sit up here and cut people's feet off for running away from being tortured or even used as sex slaves. That's not normal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shout out to Tata on the stage. And what struck me, Tata, because I was putting all this together when you were up in Kush's space today, and you made that statement about.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Tata, welcome to the stage. When you made that statement about, you had to start your business over again. This is one thing that Kirsten Mullins and Sandy Darity are talking about in this podcast. They're going to get to it at some point in there, that this was one reason why reparations was needed, and should be happening, because we have not, as Black Americans, we haven't had the luxury to start a business, fail, start again, fail, try again, fail. Sometimes it's just a one and done because we don't have the capital. We don't have the access. And we are all, and as George had stated in his comments, reparations implies that the problem is in the past, but it's not. We don't have the luxury of being treated fairly when we go to get loans or whatnot to start our business. We don't. We just don't have that. So I really want to jump right into this. Oh, go ahead, Tata. I see you got your mic open. What's up, girl?
No, I just want to say, yeah, you're right. We don't have the luxury to do that. And the way I built my business, I just, when I first started, I had the equity that I was able to get out of the home, at that time, that we built. And then, by time, when they were going through all of that, and Obama was in office, and, there was foreclosed on the home and everything, but I was able to get that equity out to start and buy a business from someone, to go with my event business. I bought a linen company. And that exploded around Florida and went well. And then during that crash, that hurt me. But I just stayed in the game, built back up, got my storefront in 2013, and then bam, this pandemic just crashed me, and that was all my money.
Right.
Nobody helped me or gave me loans with, some other things for that.
I mean, and praise God that you had the wherewithal and the fortitude to stay in the game and continue, fighting for what you believe in. And there's some people, based on what they've been through, that could have been their last straw, and they give up. And, why do we always got to take it and have it the hardest way? So it's a lot. It's a lot. So I'm going to get started on this podcast episode, you guys. Of course, I'm going to be cutting in on it because there's some key points in here. And for those of you who are on the panel or in the audience, I really need your feedback because they're going to be talking about this Homestead Act. Let's just get right into it because, they just, oh my God, this is such a great podcast. So let's get to it.
Thanks for having us.
To be with you, Judah.
I'd like to start with a very basic definition of what reparations mean in the context of Black Americans.
Want to start?
Sure.
Can you hear in the YouTube
in
streets?
our book, From Here to Equality, we actually open the book with a definition of reparations. And our definition is a program of acknowledgement, redress, and closure for a grievous injustice. And by acknowledgement, we mean that the culpable party, the party that has committed the atrocities or harms, admits its culpability and proceeds to say that it is going to make restitution. The act of restitution is what we mean by redress, where some steps are taken towards compensation for the atrocities or harms. And then the third component of our definition of reparations is what we refer to as closure, which means that the culpable party and the victimized community come to an agreement that the account is settled, that the debt has been paid. And this means that the victimized community will make no further claims on the culpable party unless there is a renewal of the atrocities or new types of atrocities take place. But otherwise, the account is finalized. So that's our definition of reparations in the context of thinking about reparations for Black Americans, specifically Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States. We think of acknowledgement as an obligation that should be taken by the Congress of the United States. We think of redress as restitution in the form of monetary payments that would be sufficient to eliminate America's racial wealth gap. And we think about closure as a moment of conciliation between the federal government and its Black American citizens whose ancestors were enslaved here, consequent upon the act of restitution.
Okay, so I do want to cut in right there because Sandy Darity just said, this is that's it. You pay these reparations. And, Sandy Darity is a scholar. He and his wife, Kirsten, that's the correct pronunciation, I believe. So he and Kirsten, they are experts on this topic. They've done all of the research. So why we are not listening to them in droves it's beyond me. because all of the other people that I hear talking about it and positioning themselves as some type of expert, they don't even have the credentials as Darity or Kirsten. So, so let's start there. And then, like he said, you pay these reparations, that's it, unless there's a renewal. And what we can see happening all the time is a renewal. We're being harmed again with this influx of illegal immigrants. We're being harmed again with all of this legislative stuff that they're doing to benefit immigrants, these illegal immigrants, before us, where we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. And I mean, I'm sure the people here in this audience can list other things that's happening that is a constant renewing of harm towards Black Americans, but yet they continue to make the case of why reparations are not needed. I mean, let's just really start there. Does anybody on Twitter, if you have a comment, let me know, cause if you do, come on, jump up off the mic. If not, we're going to get right back into this episode, because it's phenomenal. Let's see here. And then shout out to Baby Shay. Y'all do like Baby Shay say, do like she say. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe if you haven't already. Replay gang, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. Shout out to Lizzie Mack. What's going on, Lizzie Mack? George Middleton said that the civil rights movement benefits illegal immigrants more than us. Well, what? You done said it, bro. Ain't that it? Let's get back into this episode, y'all.
So specifically, I think it's important to point out that slavery is what comes to mind first and foremost, but reparations are not just about slavery. It's about a whole history of oppression and intentional suppression of people who have been racialized as Black. Can you give us a sense of what some of those other moments in history and clear decisions that were made contribute to the need for these reparations?
The United States did not have to be a slave republic. Now, that's the first opportunity to have had a different future for all of us. But we did. And then the Civil War was fought by the Confederates to retain slavery. But thankfully, they lost the war, and slavery was outlawed. And then the 13th Amendment also granted additional rights to the formerly enslaved. But this was a moment when the federal government had, in the form of Special Field Orders number 15, promised the emancipated 40-acre land grants. This is land that would have stretched in a 30-mile wide band from the South Carolina Sea Islands all the way up to the mouth of the St. Johns River in Florida, about 341 miles, basically a black belt, if you will. And this is land that was formerly owned by the Confederates, land that had been abandoned by them and confiscated because of their, efforts at secession and because they were traitors to the United States. A small number of African Americans were settled on those lands, but then Andrew Johnson becomes president. He reverses Special Field Orders 15 and insists that the land be given back to the former owners. Right? At the same time, in the form of the Homestead Act of 1862, white Americans, including recent immigrants from Europe, were given 160-acre land grants. These are lands that were in the Western Territories, basically completing the colonial settler project. So these are lands that had just only recently been occupied by indigenous people, Native Americans. That promise was kept. And those white Americans were dramatically assisted with wealth accumulation as a consequence of that single, free equity project, basically, of the federal government. So to begin with, you're looking at a policy that was going to grant 40-acre land patents to the emancipated and 160-acre land patents to white Americans. And then only the white Americans received that benefit. So for us, the racial wealth gap begins with that failure to provide those land grants to the emancipated. We might not be having this conversation if that policy had been fulfilled, and importantly, if the recipients had been protected so that they could have developed the land, prospered, profited, and importantly, bequeathed the land itself and any profits from it to their offspring. That is what white Americans have been able to do for now, over, 140 years, but that Black Americans were not able to do.
Amen. And if you notice in the snippet that I played with the lady from Britain or wherever she's from, she had stated, "Oh, well, can you remember or do you recall what it was like when some of the people were fortunate enough to get that land in Georgia, and after a year, you couldn't tell the difference between who got the land and who originally had the land." Well, guess what? That's telling me, and y'all tell me, sound off. That's telling me that there was no gap. That means the Black people that got the land in Georgia, a year later, they're holding it down just like the people who had formerly enslaved them. So, and there shouldn't be a wealth gap now. So had the government been consistent in keeping up with their commitment, their promise, Field Order 15, okay, then there wouldn't be a wealth gap now. How about that? Right? Anybody on the stage, on Twitter, any comment, any thoughts on that? All right. Muffet in YouTube saying, "I think we all understand that we can't sue for reparations. Now anti-Black parties are demonstrating that they can also use legal means to prevent the U.S. government to award reparations." Baby Shay says, "Always remember knowledge is power, and the only male Cruz is given the knowledge we need." Shout out to Baby Shay, y'all. Thank you, Baby Shay. Let me see. Just trying to stay on top of these comments over here in these YouTube streets. Closure. It cannot happen when whites won't acknowledge it and won't stop the social practices of racial discrimination. Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. I don't disagree with you one bit. And they know it exists but when they speak on it, they're only speaking on how it would benefit them. Okay. They seem to always come up with it. Well, see, if you did it, y'all can get it, we can get it. Who? Blood Pack, welcome to the stage. What's up, girl? Did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Yes, Mel, how you doing?
Doing great, great.
Well, yes, I touching on the topic at hand, specifically, I think my family had a parcel of land in that lottery in Georgia. I recently found some property information from that specifically was a lottery. It specifically said the information behind the land ownership that it based on lottery, and it was on that side of the nation. So I got to double check and see if it was actually in Georgia or just near Georgia.
Okay.
And then speaking to right. So that's just, I'm just saying that to say that the things we're hearing about them talk about are happening in still have a real time effect, long-term effect.
Absolutely.
And, her point about people of all colors own slaves, then isn't that a specific case for reparations for the descendants of chattel slaves? Because the white slave owners got reparations. And if everybody of all colors got reparations, then that means that even the melanated persons who were able to identify as the imaginary category of white, right, probably got paid. So if Guam got paid, the natives are still getting paid, then it seems like you specifically left us out, which means that's genocide.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and if you notice, they like to say, well, Black people own slaves. They own, we don't give a damn then. Where they at? Let's get the money from them.
And you know what? When they say that, I'm starting to realize that they're talking about the Africans, right? And all them coming in who brought in their own slaves.
One would presume. one would presume. And so, and if you notice, they're trying to use that to buffer it out and make us retreat and say, oh, well, if that's the case, never mind. But it wasn't us. We didn't have the opportunity to be free like that. They say, oh, there were some free people. Listen, I wish I could go all the way back and say, no, this is how it went down. But here's what I'm going to say. If you were a slave owner, I don't care if you're red, black, red, brown, whatever, white. Okay. Cut the check. All right. Cut the check. Let's get back into this this episode, because like I said, it is phenomenal. What she talks about this, the wealth gap began when the Homestead Act of 1862. And I called myself trying to set something aside for that wealth gap, or as you were, for that Homestead Act, but my iPad's not acting right about now. So, but that's good. Let's just get back into it. Here we go.
Kirsten, you just talked about the racial wealth gap in the United States and how it has really sprung from this. And Sandy, you have done a lot of work on this issue and put some real numbers to that wealth gap. Can you give us a sense of the magnitude of those disparities?
So the Federal Reserve has a survey that it administers every 3 years. And the most recent one that has been released, and we're awaiting the release of the 2022 survey, but the most recent one that has been released was 2019. And in the 2019 survey, the average Black household had $840,900 less in net worth than the average white household. So, fairly close to a $1 million difference in average net worth. That for us sets the foundation for the amount that would be due under a reparations plan, because from our perspective, the racial wealth gap is the best single economic indicator of the cumulative intergenerational effects of white supremacy. And this relates to the previous question that you asked that Kirsten responded to, because it is actually the multiple generation impact of white supremacy that lays the foundation for a reparations plan. It's not singularly slavery. It's not singularly the land distribution policy that Kirsten talked about, but it's the combination of these effects over time. Policies that the federal government has conducted, as well as the original displacement and horror that was associated with the enslavement of people who were forcibly brought to this part of the world through the transatlantic slave trade.
And if you notice, you never hear, like this lady that was speaking initially, you don't hear them talk about the additional harms. And I love what Sandy Darity just said about, let's see, let me go back here because I'm reading what he said here. Hold on just a minute, y'all. Where he talks about the intergenerational effects of white supremacy. See, they don't want to say white supremacy, and they don't want to allude to that factual piece of why slavery was so successful. Because, and then for her to try to spin it up and say, if it wasn't for the people in the West who, even though it was late in the game, after y'all took built all the wealth you could and positioned yourselves to dominate every resource on this, really on the planet. But you positioned yourself to dominate the access and gatekeep access. Then here comes the war. Okay. Which we finally were quote unquote free-ish, if you will, because look at the reason for Juneteenth. They didn't even make sure that everybody knew they were free. How about that? So let's get into that interracial white supremacy residue that we're still swimming in. And with that Homestead Act of 1862, guess what we were? We were still slaves. So while we were here, we didn't have the opportunity to buy that land. I think I read when I looked it up, it was like acres of land were going for like 9 or 10, 11, 12 cents an acre or something like that. We never had the opportunity. We worked that land, but we never had an opportunity to be able to take advantage of the same way that immigrants, okay, got to.
Well, and you talk in your book about not just, and certainly they are hugely significant, slavery and then the Homestead Act, but also things like housing policy and redlining, and also even how the GI Bill was inequitably distributed. So this is not just what might feel like kind of ancient history. This is very much contemporary and still going on in many ways.
Yes.
Well, it's also the case that the Homestead Act itself is not ancient history. The last Homestead Act was patented in 1980. So, that was a tremendous effort on the part of the federal government to help white Americans increase their wealth position. But you mentioned, what other kinds of policies were in place. So in the 19th century, the plan to assist white Americans was land ownership. But in the 20th century, the focus was on home ownership. And you had, with the GI Bill, a collaboration between the Federal Housing Administration and banks, financial institutions. On paper, the GI Bill was for all veterans. This was an opportunity for them to receive assistance purchasing a home, a business, a farm, to get education. But the program was administered discriminatorily. In fact, the only way that the legislation was passed was a consequence of Southern legislators insisting that it not disrupt their quality of life. They were very aware that if Black veterans had the opportunity to buy their own homes, to invest in a business, that they wouldn't work for them for peanuts, that they would not be sharecroppers, that they would not work in their lumber mills, that they would not work in their turpentine fields, that their wives and sisters and daughters would not be domestic workers, working for a pittance, really. And so the concession was that they be allowed to administer the programs locally. So they made the decisions about who was worthy of these benefits, and it wasn't Black veterans. One case, a really extreme case, is that of Mississippi. One of our colleagues, Ira Katz Nelson, who's written a fabulous book called When Affirmative Action Was White, looked at one year in the 1940s when about 3,900 veterans received the benefit for housing. 2 of them in the entire state of Mississippi were Black. So nearly 4,000. And when you look at the North, the numbers are much larger, but the ratios are similar.
Okay, got to stop it right there. Can y'all believe that? So there's no whitewashing this. You got 39,000 as a sample. 39,000 veterans and only 2 get to take advantage of that GI Bill and buy a home. So there's no way to spin this. You cannot whitewash this. And one of my issues is, they stopped CRT, they stopped DEI, they stopped anything Black, all things Black. All right. So that they would have a clear path to run this whitewashed BS. And that's what's going on. The mic is open. Anybody in the Twitter sphere, if you got something you want to say before I get back into this podcast, or anybody on these YouTube streets, I just didn't want to play this thing all the way without giving anybody an opportunity to sound off. Muffet is saying that Robert E. Lee's property was confiscated by the U.S., as was much land during Field Order 15, but the Supreme Court ordered the land returned due to the unconstitutional nature of the seizure. How could they even, that's even ridiculous. The only way, and Darity knows this, that we will receive reparations is by an act of Congress and on the level of a constitutional amendment, which could prevent opponents from suing to prevent it. Thank you, Muffet, for adding clarity to that. And then why aren't we speaking this in unison from that perspective? If if an act of Congress is what it's going to take to get that check cut, and before we get it to the bank, they stop payment on it, then why aren't we coming at it that way? Why is Ron Daniels not saying that? I need to hear from somebody. Anybody? Trouble, what's up? Tata, what's going on? Anybody?
you're not hearing it from certain voices because the other voices like Ron Daniels have a different agenda.
Mm.
And I think with the rest of us, for the most part, we are in a sort of a frenzy to where we're steadily, there's always some type of bomb dropping. And I think from a congressional point, we know that's the main way and the one way that we have to get it. But because it hasn't been happening, and it's looking like both parties are kind of, not bringing it, talking about it, not trying to give it to us, and we're seeing other ways when in actuality, this is the one way that we really need to be honing in on and focused on, but we're in a frenzy where we're, all over the place. So there's a, but yeah.
Yeah, no. Good clarification on that. Trouble, aka the Oracle. You say the right things, girl. You already know what's up. Yeah, I think that's it. And it's unfortunate. And, we're getting through this podcast, but Darity's going to talk about, and he makes such a valid, clear point why we should not be pursuing state reparations right now. And why people who are not as smart or not as informed, okay, technically, as Darity and Kirsten, why we're not listening to them. I'm sorry. I just don't understand it. I don't understand it, but let's get back into it.
And in terms of the recency of these harms and damages, I think it's important to point out that for the very first 10 years of Kirsten and my own life, we lived under the conditions of legal segregation in the United States, I guess what people blithely refer to as the Jim Crow period. And that was a period that encompassed at least half of the lives of our parents up until the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. There is at least one legal scholar, the late Boris Bitker, who argued that actually legal segregation made more of a case for reparations than slavery itself. And I think he made that argument primarily because there were more individuals who were living who had been exposed to the effects of the Jim Crow period. But even in the aftermath of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we still have the ongoing harms of mass incarceration, vast health disparities between Black and white Americans, police killings of unarmed Blacks, and ongoing discrimination in labor, credit, and housing markets.
But I want to say, though, before we get away completely from the historical moment, we have learned that between Reconstruction and the end of World War II, there were at least 100 massacres of Black people. Many of your listeners may be aware of the Tulsa Massacre, which occurred in 1921, because there was a memorialization of that massacre that took place 100 years later in 2021. And what many of us learned is that here was a community where Black people managed to acquire some material wealth. There were churches, there were schools, there were several movie theaters, there was a skating rink, many businesses that were Black owned. And they drew not just the attention, but the envy of their white.
Oh, shoot. We got this podcast, but okay, see, she's saying too good. Is YouTube messing with the streets? Oh, my goodness. Kirsten was saying that, and this thing is buffering, y'all. Hopefully it's going to get straightened out. Let me see, 3263. Let me try to do this. Hold on just a moment. See, she was cooking. Kirsten was cooking. Let's see, wait a minute, here we go. I think she's back. Oh. Yeah, she was cooking, and that's what they did. They decided to do. Hold on, y'all. Here we go.
Burned from the top. And people were trying to figure out, what had happened, but they also targeted pedestrians on the federal government. Among the many strategies that the white rioters used they used decommissioned military planes and firebombed the community because the buildings, many of them burned from the top. And people were trying to figure out, what had happened, but they also targeted pedestrians on the street. I mean, it was, like living in a war zone. It's a horrible situation. But we were also aware of a similar massacre that had occurred in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898. Although both of our children went to school in North Carolina, and this was not part of the curriculum. I think the state of North Carolina had a Wilmington Race Commission in 2000. Does that sound about right? And it became much more, widely known. But this is a situation where, the white Democrats had been disenfranchised. This is because they had participated in the Civil War on the side of the Confederacy, and they refused to pledge allegiance, give the oath of allegiance to the United States. And as a result, they couldn't vote. And in areas that had been former plantation areas, the majority of the population was Black people. And so if they were registered to vote, then their candidates were going to win. And so rather than, engage in compromise or try to, create some kind of coherence with the Republicans, they decided that they wanted things to go back to the way they were before slavery had ended. And when insults and threats didn't work, they resorted to violence. And they burned out the Black business district, and Black people fled. And for the next 70 years, no Republicans were elected. The Black population dropped about, 40%?
Well, it went from being a majority to being a minority of the Wilmington population, yeah.
And about 200 and some white men signed their name to what they called the White Men's Declaration of Independence. We learned through our research that 10 years earlier in Fort Bend County, Texas, which is near Houston, it's where my grandfather's from, my maternal grandfather, and there had been a similar massacre there with similar results. And they too had penned a White Men's Declaration of Independence. Over 400 of them signed those documents. And the documents are available, respectively, in the Texas State Archives and the North Carolina State Archives. They were not afraid of putting their names to these documents. But what we're learning is that there were playbooks that were being used, like open source documents that were very effective. We know that the playbook that was used in Wilmington, North Carolina, was used by the white supremacists in Atlanta for the 1906 riot. And I'm sure we'll discover many other connections. But you begin to see maybe the earliest white riot that we have seen in our research was Colfax, Louisiana in 1873. But then you have Coushatta in 1874, Vicksburg, at least 100 of these. And the characteristics, not only were Black lives snuffed out, but oftentimes, once Black families had fled, their property was appropriated by the very people who murdered and massacred the community. So this is another instance of the loss of Black wealth that the federal government just, turned a blind eye, and in some instances was complicit.
Okay, and so when they come up with that argument about, shout out to One Love on the Twitter sphere stage, when they come up with that argument about, well, Black people, they ain't gonna know what to do with their money. We've demonstrated historically that we know how to get in where we fit in. We've demonstrated that we know how to handle our situation, so much so that they become envious and jealous and wicked, and have done everything they could to destroy whatever it was we built. They want to see us down. So this excuse, this talking point of well, they wouldn't know what to do with it, and they're not capable of it. They don't want us to have what is rightfully ours because they know we'll outshine them. They know this. The mic is open. Who got a comment? Anybody? Shout out to Rel on stage.
Hey, Mel. Shout out to everybody on the stage.
Hey.
Shout out. Hey, y'all, that space last night had me all the way. all the way hurt.
Absolutely. Run it up the middle.
Just listening to what she was saying. And I'm assuming that was Kirsten Mullen and Dr. Darity. There's always this notion that we somehow have to be 10 times as better or 10 times as polished in order to get money when, people been around, frivolously spending money like wildfire, and no one has ever questioned where they put their money or how they put them or how they're spending their money. I think with us, and you look at the different experiences by generation, we have a lot going on. One, infrastructure and framework. The other thing is collectively having the mindset of understanding that I believe if we get money, we are going to do just that we are going to build and create framework because it is innate in us, like the ants or the bees, for us to build our honeycombs first.
Absolutely.
The problem is they don't want to give us our money because they know that we will build our own infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And I think that is one of the biggest threats to the society.
Right. And we've done it before and we've shown them. Shout out to 400 on the Twitter stage. Unmute your mic. What's up?
Hey, what's up, family? How y'all doing?
Hey, we're doing great. How are you?
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to go back. I was driving when she was speaking from the first speaker, and I just wanted to go back to her logic. Okay, if families who died in the Civil War, the Union troops, they're going to get reparations. Well, anybody who ever went to war, ever lost somebody, need to get reparations. We'll use her own logic. And then she said that black people own slaves. Okay, that's cool. If they own slaves, give us their name and we'll go after them next. But right now, we're going after the American government. So if they want to keep, if they want to play that game, let's play that game. Give us their names and we're going after them next.
Well, there you go.
And I'll yield right there.
No, absolutely. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. And, thanks for 100, because I do want to reset the room. Had a couple more people come in since we played that. So the basis of this episode today is about this lady at the it was called Intelligence. The West Should Pay Reparations for Slavery. It was a debate. The full link to the debate is in the description box. But essentially, this lady who is not from America is trying to say that no matter how bad slavery was, the West at least had a conscience. And at some point, close to the end of slavery, they decided, we ought to do right by the people. Now, that's me paraphrasing, but that's essentially what she's saying. And it's ridiculous. So we heard her make this lame cause for why reparations is not owed. And we also heard a snippet from Ron Daniels, who is, I can't remember his title or whatever, but it's a snippet off of Tavis Smiley's show where he was saying that they were trying to get Biden to make a commitment to sign on to HR40 and agree to get a commission and a study and discussion about solutions or words of that effect. The snippet, that snippet is in the description as well, so you can get all of that. The point is, and Darity and Kirsten are going to be discussing that in this podcast that we're in, but the point is that HR40 needs a lot of work. It needs to be revised. And so if Ron Daniels is saying, well, yeah, HR40, then, but you're failing to state that it needs, if you want HR40, we need revisions, the revision version of it. Okay. George Middleton is saying, well, the Black community use reparations individually or collectively. Which one would you prefer? I think you're going to have, George, that's a good question. And I think that you're going to have some people that are going to use it individually because they're not like us. And you have some who's going to use it collectively because they're not like us. They're going to, it's owed to them. And I feel like people are going to, pretty much the sentiment is I don't have to justify why or what I do with these reparations, because that seems to be the pushback question. You guys aren't going to be able to do anything with it. Muffet on YouTube is saying anything less is a waste of time. Whether it takes most of us 5 years or 40 years from now to realize that, George Milton, I would hope that a plurality of our people would work in unison on political, social, and economic affairs, whether we get reparations or not. Good point of view from you, Muffet. Rella, you got your hand up. What's going on?
No, and I remember that the woman that was speaking, and she was actually giving a lecture. Her name, you're talking about Catherine. And I watched that video and I tagged Dr. Darity in that. And, and my issue with her is, again, you got someone who is
not
literally
eligible.
Not even not eligible, but again, you have people who are coming out of university and they're utilizing the fact that maybe they've been in university or they have access to proximity to white people or whiteness, that they want to speak on the fact that slavery was everywhere. Slavery was all around the world. Slavery was this, that, and the third. Right. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm listening to her, so just because slavery was everywhere, you're trying to desensitize people from wanting to repair people that they've harmed, or repair groups who have harmed people, to repair the damage they have done throughout the generation.
Absolutely.
That is my issue.
Well, and you know what, and not even to interrupt you, Rella, but even Dr. Claude Anderson, in which either Black Labor, White Wealth, it might have been that book, where he outlined how slavery went down. Okay, they started with a multitude of ethnicities. White people got, I don't have the book in front of me to quote verbatim, so I'm just going to give you a paraphrased version of it. Some of them folks couldn't work out. Okay, white people, they couldn't take it. Okay, others, it just wouldn't work. Some people were, I'm too good for this, I'm this and that, and this and that. I think why slavery was...
Or just now, Mel, we can even relate it to just now to actually append to Dr. Claude Anderson's book. They literally, I posted a video about a news event where a white woman and man literally had 5 children, somehow 5 Black children that they had locked up in a barn, and they were slaving these children out. They had a 16-year-old in the barn, and they had to ask her what was going on. She was malnourished, and they were using her as slavery. Right. Every time movies of identification of a mirror are made with these people in movies, they are not made as the hero. They're made as the villains and the ones who are committing genocide. So if you're telling me every time we have to even watch the image of historical records that these people are not heroes, they're not the ones that people speak of as the founding fathers. They're the ones who were literally genociding people across this country.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is like and I'm going to get back to this podcast real quickly, but that's exactly what I'm saying. They keep trying to get the whitewash on, and then the excuse, and shout out to 400, who made his statement about, okay, if Black people were slave owners, and give us their names, and we'll, they next, we'll get to them next. So they might as well start sacking their chips. But right now, it's the white supremacists dispositioning of how they applied their white supremacist viewpoints and behavior towards Black Americans is what this movement for reparations in the United States is all about. We're not talking about nowhere else but the USA. Do the Caribbeans and the this and the that, do they have a cause for reparations? Maybe so. But guess what? That ain't on the agenda right now. We're talking about one thing. And William Darity and Kirsten Mullins have, why we're not listening to them is beyond me, because they've got the plan we just choose not to align with it, and it's ridiculous why we don't. Let me keep on going with this because it's almost over. Here's Dr. Darity about to talk about the self-identification and why, who would qualify for reparations. So let's go here.
Frequently, the observation is made by some opponents of reparations, and I think perhaps most notably Mitch McConnell, that there's no one living today who enslaved anybody, and there's no one living today who was subjected to slavery, and therefore there should be no case for reparations. But the role that slavery plays in the contemporary case for reparations for living Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved here is a consequence of the long-term impact of white supremacy on Black lives. And that impact is linked directly to the beliefs and the practices that were undertaken during the period of enslavement. So we are not talking about harms to living Black Americans that are associated with their direct exposure to slavery. We are talking about the harms that are consequent upon the intergenerational effects of slavery and the policies that the federal government pursued in the aftermath of slavery that had the effect of creating this immense racial wealth gap. I think earlier I mentioned that the survey of consumer finances indicates that the racial wealth gap between the average Black household and the average white household is approximately $840,900. If we were to accumulate that figure across the entire population of Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved here, the per person measure would be about $350,000, but the overall measure would be somewhere in the vicinity of $14.3 trillion.
Let's talk more about who would be eligible under this plan. And you lay out 4 pillars of an effective and meaningful reparations program. And the first is eligibility. So how would you propose determining who is eligible for reparations?
So for us, there is both a lineage standard and an identity standard that need to be met. So in terms of the lineage standard, we're talking about individuals who can document that they are a descendant from at least one person who was enslaved in the United States. The second criteria is the identity standard. So for us, these are individuals who self-identify as Black, African-American, Afro-American, or Negro on some legal document at least 12 years prior to the creation of a reparations program or the enactment of a study commission for reparations. Both of these criteria are really important and must be met. We were very aware that there are individuals who live as white who are descended from at least one Black ancestor. But for our purposes, they would not be eligible to receive reparations. We're strictly talking about Black American descendants of U.S. slavery.
The identity standard is based upon self-identification. It's not based upon the use of DNA testing or some phenotype test in terms of skin shade or the like. And we tried to set up this 12-year standard for self-identification to prevent people from suddenly declaring that they were Black when they saw the opportunity to have a monetary benefit from a reparations plan. Yeah.
And and that's so important. And Tariq has said that, he's been saying that, hasn't necessarily had to say it a lot nowadays, because we all understand for the most part, what the parameters should be. But this is why, and here's the thing, we know right now, Elon Musk, who, oh my God, we know Elon Musk right now, if he wanted to say, oh, I'm African American, literally he could say he is. And as such, try to ease his way in to getting some form of reparations. And I think this is the other thing that has the dominant society being unwilling to acquiesce. They can't find a way to get a piece of these reparations. And what's so crazy is, did they shoehorn themselves in some type of way to get the form of reparations they paid to the Japanese interned people, Jewish society who, the Holocaust happened to, not on this land. You know, they're not trying to get, except for when they write the check through government policies and then they skim it up off the top. They can't legitimately find a way to get what is owed to us. So there's that, and the fact that they just don't want us to have. They don't want us to catch up to them on the wealth gap because they know for sure we will supersede them just based on our own ingenuity and the fact that we have the same access that they have, or we would have it if reparations were paid.
I do want to go back to the eligibility point of having at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States. How difficult is that for people to find out or to know at this point?
So I think more finding aids are being made available every day online. We know now that all of the Freedmen Bureau records are online. All of the extant Black newspapers are now available online. Callie House, who was one of the early advocates for reparations for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery, had an organization that sought initially to petition the federal government for pensions for the Black Union soldiers, and then transitioned to petitioning for redress for enslaved Black people writ large. And the application process required them to include not only their names or their mark, but where they had been enslaved, who their enslavers were, if they had been serially enslaved, to have that information as well. And she recruited at least 300,000 dues-paying members. This is at the beginning of the 1900s. And all of those applications are in the Library of Congress. But we would advocate that the federal government create an agency that would be, operated by professional genealogists, whose job it would be to assist individuals who were trying to make their claim free of charge. But I'm just astounded every day. I receive, emails from libraries letting me know about some new database that's available. So it's not an impossible task, we don't believe. And then also there is the process of inclusion by omission. So say you had a relative who you believe was enslaved, but they don't appear in the 1860 census, but they were old enough to have appeared in the 1860 census. So you find their names in the 1870 census. Say they were 1 years old in 1860. So the fact that they don't appear in 1860 but do appear in 1870 suggests that that individual was enslaved.
I would add, in the edited volume that Kirsten and I worked on with Lucas Hubbard, the Black Reparations Project, Evelyn McDowell has an essay in which she details a number of examples of the ways in which people could obtain genealogical information that would establish that they had at least one enslaved ancestor. And I think her essay also demonstrates that this is something that could be accomplished for virtually anyone who was trying to do that. And indeed, the more instances that become documented, the greater the possibility of improving the documentation for other people who have not yet been reached.
Yeah. All the interlocking familial connections would be evident if more people would share the information they've gleaned.
So another pillar of the reparations program is who would be responsible for paying them. And Sandy, as you said, that price tag is over $14 trillion based on the most recent information from the Federal Reserve. The two of you state very clearly, for several reasons, that the federal government is the entity that should be responsible for paying reparations. Can you tell us some of the reasons why they are the responsible party?
I mean, we talked a bit about the federal government being the culpable party, that it made slavery legal in the first place. I mean, basically creating an affirmative action program for white people. That didn't have to be. Then we have the Civil War itself, when the South had the option of compensated emancipation. On numerous occasions, Abraham Lincoln met with different groups of Southerners, trying to convince them to accept payments of up to $300 for each of their human chattel in exchange for emancipating them. But we, believe the Southerners were convinced that they were going to win the war, and they really just weren't interested in having that conversation. I mean, literally days before the war ended, Lincoln was still trying to have this conversation, and he just couldn't get any traction. But that would have been a huge thing. The compensated emancipation did occur in the District of Columbia. This was in 1862, but it was not a precedent for the rest of the country, surprisingly, not even in the border states. So that's another missed opportunity. But then you have the Civil War ending with a program actually that was already underway. There were several experimental projects taking place that had placed Black families on 40-acre land grants. South Carolina was one, Port Royal, South Carolina, that was wildly successful. This was the first time that, the contraband had an opportunity to sell their produce, their harvest at a fixed price. So the government was the buyer. And I think every single settlement was profitable, wildly profitable. So it's not as if they didn't have a proof of concept in hand, but Andrew Johnson comes in and reverses his whole program and gives the land back to the Confederates without making them sign an oath of allegiance to the United States. Then you have, coming forward, the federal government deciding again to assist whites with the GI Bill. Then you have right behind that the whole redlining process, which again pairs government agencies with financial institutions and mortgage institutions, basically starving Black people of credit. You could get a house if you wanted to pay an exorbitant amount of money, for the insurance, and usually you had to put forth a much higher down payment on the house, which most people couldn't afford to do. Then Black people would be pushed into usually one quadrant of the city, and that whole area would be redlined, hence the term. So the value of your house, the physical plant is decreased. Then you have the whole interlacing of the interstate highway system. And in so many cities, like our own hometown of Durham, North Carolina, the Black business district is crisscrossed by these highways. Your foot traffic is gone. Usually the businesses themselves are dispersed. I know.
And I just got to jump in here because you guys can hear this laundry list of harms. And I mean, she's spitting it like butter that you almost have to listen carefully. I mean, we know about these things. And so to us that have gone through it, we're hearing it. We're like, yep. But if you notice that same lady on the video that we talked about at first, they won't come near this part. They won't come near this list of harms because there is no excuse. There's no back door. There's no side door. You can't get away from that. And earlier, when they talked about there was that first opportunity, and I think they said in DC they got some form of reparations. Well, that was before, the medical, what we're going through now with the disparity in medical care. The dominant society keeps delaying paying this debt, but they continue the harm. So the tag keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And to be honest with you, that's why the only thing they can say that the naysayers of reparations can say is, I didn't own slaves. I'm not a family member of anybody that owns slaves, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the worse this gets for us, the worse their argument sounds. And why we're not listening to Sandy Darity and Kirsten Mullins at this point. They're laying the case out so smooth and easy. I mean, I think we could just slide on in if we all got together behind this particular perspective and demanded these reparations. I mean, she ain't done yet.
In Durham, the Black community, business elite were promised a quadrant of the city where they could be relocated. It hasn't happened yet. This is something that happened in the 1960s. And I don't think Durham is that unusual. But not only that, you've got Black people now living under highways. So there's noise pollution, there's air pollution. People have all kinds of respiratory illnesses and asthma, not to speak of, the difficulty of trying to manage, your own commute living in these areas and knowing that you can't sell the house. I mean, who wants to buy that house? So you're in a really bad situation. And even the folks who were fortunate enough to have had their homes and businesses taken through eminent domain, the Black folks who were in that position, they almost never received what the house was really worth. The amount of relocation allowances that they received did not equal what their white counterparts received. I think one of the students was talking about his own research that confirms that for the most part, many of these Black people never again lived in a house of comparable quality. Eminent domain was kind of the end of their middle classdom.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in present day, and I see your hand up, brother. Hey, even in present day, look at how they played the folks in Cabrini Green. They made everybody move out. They told the people, oh, you get out and we're going to get you somewhere. We're going to get you something. There's so many people that were displaced. And then years later, they tried to put this council together and we're going to solve the problem now. And a couple people who never got displaced, they ended up being on the council. And the guy that was leading the council, he was shocked that, there was somebody like, well, listen, I was a resident of Cabrini Green. I'm a victim of what happened. And y'all never made it right. This, again, playbook. This is the same thing. This is just a page out of the playbook of how to ensure that a Black American cannot succeed. And my statement is not to be confused with it's the white man's fault. That's not what I'm saying. They've got control. They've got the keys to the gate, and they are doing every damn thing they possibly can to prevent us from prevailing at damn near anything. Rella, you got it.
Hey, I think I saw Trouble wanting to come off the mic.
I got her up. She's up here.
Let her go before me. I'm putting away this cabbage.
Okay, all right.
Hey, I got kicked out of the space. I don't know what happened.
Okay, sorry, girl. Hey.
So, yeah, they know everything that Darity and his wife is outlining is something that we all know. It's something that doesn't need a study because our government knows the ills and harms against us. And that's why the white woman not the white woman, but the woman in the first video didn't touch this subject because then you would have to acknowledge that everything that you stated prior to touching on this subject is null and void because she wanted to specifically make a case against it. This makes a case for it. And so she even delved into how landowners, the white landowners who were given land during a certain period of time had squandered their land basically and didn't have that land. Because remember, she said, well, we had landowners who were giving the land during the Homestead Act and you couldn't tell the difference between them and those who didn't get the year or two later.
Right.
That's because you squandered your land. That has nothing to do with what is owed. So everything that she said was an excuse against it so you're trying to justify you all not being able to have enough sense to how to keep your land when you turned around and found ways and instituted rules to steal ours.
There go the Oracle. There go trouble. Trigger trouble on them. Absolutely. And that is, so like I said, that's why she's got to keep it narrow. And a lot of the naysayers, all they're saying is their excuses are, they don't need it. My family didn't have it. We don't owe it. It won't us. And they ain't gonna know what to do with the money anyway. But address this other stuff.
Wait till I'm about to blow your mind. You ready?
We're listening.
You ready? Buckle up. The white landowners that claim that they actually could not hold on to their land,
half of them actually did not own land. Half of them were the immigrants that Martin Luther King was talking about when they were ushering in people from other war-torn countries during the period of Reconstruction, in the very beginning, when Gordon Granger signed the Orders 15. So there's other orders too, but I'm just going to just to go slow. They were able to go to the government with a piece of paper that stated, I own this land because I worked this land. They had just gotten here. These were immigrants that just got here, that they had put into this land to undergird white populations and the slave populations that just were free, and they had mounds of land. The sharecropping lands were heavily occupied by the freed people. The people on December 6, 1865, after Juneteenth situation happened in Galveston. Remember, Galveston is just something that was in one state. When Juneteenth popped off as far as celebration and acknowledgement, because they weren't trying to let them people go down there, it was happening around the country, that even in my state of Virginia, down in Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, slave states, they were rebelling. And Andrew Johnson, crooked white Klan self, said, you got to swear an oath to the United States, because they were trying to rise up again. And that's when them bitches was like, excuse my language. They were like, really? We'll go ahead and do that, but trust and believe we just gonna lay in the cut. And while we laying in the cut, let's bring in these other people, because we got to get these people off these lands. And they didn't even give the landowners, the emancipated people, their right to own their stuff. That means people who, when you hear the lady in the video say, there were black people who owned black people in America. Those were people who had bought their families. Those were people who had slave plantations, not slave plantations, but they had plantations of land that they were buying their families. It wasn't this big number of black people that were, there was some raggedy black people that were from maybe like the Caribbean who were slave owners here, or people from other melanated countries who did have plantations here. But we're talking about the black people who had land, and they were buying their families back and bringing them onto their land. These people had mounds of land, and white folks or people from other countries were able to come in, and all they had to do was work on the sharecrop land with a piece of paper behind the back of the sharecroppers, go to the government or their state government and say, I own this land. Here's my name. They didn't even have to have a deed.
Right. No. Yeah, we know. Like I said, you're absolutely right, Rella. They run in the game. And to be honest with you, there's an actual updated version of that same game now, where they're telling homeowners right now in 2024, check your traps, because I think I read this article where one homeowner came home and either got something in the mail or something on her door talking about somebody else owns the property. So again, there's a playbook. They're operating by it. It's all out of pocket. Shout out to all the people in the Twitter space. People on YouTube, y'all do like Baby Shay say, do like she say. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. And also in the Jumbotron is the link to my YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, share the video, subscribe, and then stay subscribed. Okay. But we're going to continue on with this podcast because, again, William Darity, Kirsten Mullins are breaking this thing down, why reparations are needed. And there is no clap back. There's nothing you can say to justify not paying, or let me put it like this, not cutting the check.
So Kirsten has talked about the federal government as the culpable party, but we've also argued that it is the capable party. And other levels of government are not capable of meeting the reparations bill. In fact, we have said that this range of initiatives that are being undertaken in a number of municipalities and in a handful of states are intrinsically incomplete, inconsistent, and inequitable. By incomplete, we mean that these policies are practices being undertaken by cities and states that are labeled as reparations intrinsically cannot fulfill the amount that is due. The federal government does have the capacity to meet a bill of $14.3 trillion. I think that's fully evident as a consequence of what occurred in response to the Great Recession, as well as what occurred in response to the pandemic. The federal government amassed significant amounts of funds for expenditure purposes to deal with each of those crises without having any significant change in the level of taxes that people were incurring. So the federal government can do it, but states and localities cannot. Their total combined budgets at the present moment come to something less than $5 trillion, and the bill that we've outlined is at least $14.3 trillion. So that's the incompleteness dimension. The inconsistency arises because these various state and local initiatives are uncoordinated.
Keyword.
And they are not interwoven or integrated with one another. So there's not a necessary degree of compatibility between them. And then finally, they're inequitable because they are not uniform. So eligible recipients in different communities are going to receive different types of restitution, if we indeed want to call it that. And in fact, we would argue that these local and state initiatives are something that could have value from the standpoint of reducing the impact of the various harms that have taken place, but they do not have the capacity to essentially provide adequate compensation for the magnitude of the range of harms that have been inflicted on the victimized community. And so we would say it's okay to undertake some of these initiatives, but just don't call them reparations, because they don't deserve the label of reparations due to their insufficiency.
I mean, that's bars right there. They don't deserve the label of reparations due to their insufficiency. And how about the fact, and I'd love to know somebody's perspective on this, the fact that Darity has made it clear that the inconsistent, uncoordinated process in which these individual states are trying to get this quote unquote reparations is really ruining the game. And I think I feel like we could put that state pursuit on the back burner, keep it simmering, like 400 said. Just get us the names. We'll come after them as soon as we get done with this right here. You know, I think if all of our energy were focused on that and we were using one voice as a collective community, we'd probably be further down the road in this reparations game. But for some reason, we're not getting there. Rella, you got your hand up. What's going on? Yeah.
And so this is where I push back on Darity in his submission in regards to the states, because the state's constitution mirrored the federal constitution. And he's saying, don't call it reparations on the state level. Well, they called it slavery on the state level because the constitution on the federal level said slavery was legal. So at this point in time, the right things that we have is lineage based. We have that the emancipated people were the contraband people known as emancipated, known as the freedmen, known as now in today's time African American, Black American, colored, and were given several classifications. That work has been done. I think the also thing that happens with, again, people who believe that that their way is the sole way and they don't have updated information. Like he mentioned, he said the state levels have a $5 million
budget.
Collectively.
Well, that's collectively. Well, that's been proven to be untrue. Illinois actually just received a budget of over, I think it was $45 billion to actually go after initiatives that have been put forth, meaning that the states who are instituting New America agendas actually have been fortified with money. California having the highest gross GDP in the country, being number 4 or number 6 in the world, only the state itself. And I think that when we have these conversations, we need that right time historical or right now data to present to the public, to let the public know, no, the states have the money because the states get their money from the federal government. As a matter of fact, Darity's whole point is to go after the federal government because the federal government and its agencies, which the Federal Reserve, that prints money to be sent to Ukraine and Israel and all these different foreign countries combined would exceed the money that literally goes to the states, but it does not mean the states are getting off scot-free and that we should not call it reparations. I think reparative compensatory justice is a local, state, township, and federal debt owed.
Okay, now Rella. Now I got Muffet. I got Muffet on the YouTube streets. Somehow, good point, Rella. Rella, the only male Cruz, does not disagree with you. I think, and where I'm coming from, which is why I agree wholeheartedly why this podcast episode moved me so much, and is because, and like Muffet just said, and it's coming up here. I was getting ready to recite this. What Darity is saying is that collectively, the states have a $5 trillion budget. And so when Darity made these statements and these were the findings he had, it wasn't that he omitted the information you just spit. It's that situation. It's that, well, hold on. Let me just make this point real quick. It's that this has evolved because we do the research and then they keep on with the harms. Okay. And so the harms keep going. Okay. And so when we sat there with that $5 trillion budget and the availability to do it, they found the money, like Darity said, they found the money to pay this. They found the money to pay that. They found the money to give you to Ukraine. And it had no impact on the everyday John, Jane, Q public. So the point is that they're giving money to the states now in some capacities to really maybe make it look like, see, we can't afford to do reparations. They wouldn't have to give all that money to the states if they weren't trying to avoid paying or cutting the check for reparations. So I think that I agree with you about the state level, the harms, getting that squared away. But I do think if we should do it one pursuit at a time. So because it'll be more of us pushing for the same thing. The same will be like-minded. But again, I defer to Darity and Kirsten before I would defer to anyone else, because as far as everybody else in the game, these are the two, smartest ones, and that's not to insult anyone else. But these two have put in the work. It's obvious. And so why we willfully won't move in the direction that they're leading us, they've done the work in, again, it's beyond me. But I'm going to keep going on with this episode because it is almost finished. But I do want to keep going on. Let's hear what else Darity has to say.
Going back to the 4 pillars of a reparations plan, the final element is the form that payments should take and what they can be used for. What do you propose, Kirsten?
We think that the payment should be made directly to the eligible recipients. This is exactly what happened in the case of the victims of the Holocaust. This is what happened for the victims of 9/11. This is what happened in the United States again for Japanese Americans who were unlawfully interned during World War II. No one said we should put the money in a particular fund, or that it should go toward education, or it should go toward housing, which is what's happening in Evanston, Illinois. The individual recipients were given the opportunity to decide for themselves how those funds would be spent. And that's exactly what we think should happen here. I mean, we think it's a bit odd that when the potential recipients of an equity project like this, a debt that's being paid is Black American descendants of U.S. slavery, that people suggest all these other ways that the debt should be paid. This group has been harmed. There have been a volley after volley after volley of atrocities beset on them, and the payment should be made directly to them as they have been for other harmed groups.
I'd like to talk about HR 40, which is a bill establishing the Commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. It was first introduced in 1989, but it's also gone through many revisions in the decades since. You've expressed serious concerns about HR 40. Can you share why?
The bill, as you said, has been revised many times over the 30 plus years that it's been in existence, and not to the good. The number of commissioners was originally 7. Now there are 15, a very unwieldy 15. A quorum is defined as 7 members. So not a majority, not a supermajority, but 7 of 15. The commission members now cannot be selected from any group of elected officials. So no mayor, no governor, no member of the House or the Senate may serve, which is odd because those are exactly the kinds of people who tend to serve on these commissions. And, the American public is usually happy to see them serve because they are accountable to the American public. But they may not serve on this commission. Interestingly, those individuals in the House and the Senate cannot be paid to serve on a commission. The folks who serve on this commission will receive up to executive 4-level salaries of about $172,000 a year. The length of time that they may deliberate has been expanded. So it seems that the folks who revised this legislation wanted to be sure that the commissioners did receive a salary, which is odd. We think of this as a sacred mission, serving on these commissions. And the idea is not that they are doing the work of the commission. They would have an administrative staff that would be assigned to work with them. They would have oversight. And certainly the administrative staff would be paid, and the commissioners should be paid for their expenses. But our assumption is that they would have a day job. And I'm a little concerned about individuals who would only be willing to serve if they could be paid an extraordinary salary. These are some of the structural problems with the bill. Let me add another structural problem. The director of the commission is not someone who's appointed by an elected official. This is an individual who is appointed by the chair and the vice chair of the commission. But the director has been given the authority to appoint 6 of the 15. So those 6 plus 1 more would give you a quorum. Just a little odd. Then on the, on the substantial side, HR 40 does not include any of the 4 pillars. It does not indicate who the eligible party is. And for us, these are individuals who are descended from Black American descendants of U.S. slavery and who self-identified for at least 12 years prior to the creation of a reparations program or study commission, self-identified as Black African American, Afro-American, or Negro on a legal document. That's not part of HR 40. HR 40 does not indicate that the elimination of the racial wealth gap, this $14.3 trillion gap, this debt, is an essential part of the bill. HR 40 does not say that payments should be made directly to the eligible recipients, nor does it say that the federal government is the culpable and the capable party. So, one might ask, well, what does HR 40 say? It doesn't say much more than authorizing a study commission. Importantly, they have asked to be exempt from something called the Federal Advisory Committee Act. And this is legislation that was created in the 1970s to make it more likely that entities of this type did operate in the light, that they hold public hearings, that their agendas that their minutes, that their reports are made public, that they hold hearings, that individuals be allowed to give testimony, that those testimonies be placed in a repository where anyone could access them. This commission has asked, the writers of this legislation have asked to be exempt from that. And, we just want to know why. We are convinced that many people have not read HR40 and that they really don't know exactly what it says. Unfortunately, it's the only legislation we have. There's a companion bill in the Senate, but it's almost identical to HR40. And if one comes out opposing HR40, it feels, to many that you are opposing reparations, which is absolutely not the case for us. We are virulent supporters of reparations, adamant in our support of championing reparations, but HR40 is not going to get us there.
And there we have it. As far as what's my guy's name? Daniels, who we played the clip of him earlier, saying that he wanted Biden to sign an executive order that, we get that study going with HR40, blah, blah, blah. And just more waste of time. We don't need a study. We've made this clear throughout the program today. We don't need any more studies. We don't need any more commissions. Cut the check. Everyone else, every other ethnicity has an opinion. Every other ethnicity has come to a conclusion as to why reparations is not owed. Okay, so what in God's name are y'all trying to study? Okay, the study time's over. Ain't no more study. Study what account you gonna pull that 15 or how much $1 trillion. Study what account you gonna get that them trillions of dollars out of, and cut the check. And again, my question is, why aren't we, as easily and smoothly as Darity and Kirsten have laid this out, why aren't we behind why aren't we pushing that? Why would somebody say, hey, let's do HR 40? Then does that sound like someone who's hip to the square? Go ahead, trouble the oracle. Go ahead, girl. Ooh, go ahead.
Okay, so the study thing is really, it's always irked me hearing something about a study, because the study is just more delay. And the more we talk about a study, it just sounds like that is a good reason for you delaying the inevitable. And what you would like to study is how you can somehow segue white folks into this money, if it is to be given. And so that's the only thing that you really, that a lot of them have in their minds to study, is how can we monkey wrench this money the same way we monkey wrench the money to the so-called 5 civilized tribes that they keep bringing up. Because notice, even with the first video that you played, the woman kept, and they always do this, they always reference the 5 civilized tribes. So we have to ask ourselves, why are they called the 5 civilized tribes? Why do they reference that? Why is that important? And notice Biden even said when he was asked about reparations a long time ago, well, if you can find a way to get put the natives in there as well. Why? Because you know what you did when it came to the natives that was on this land. That's a whole nother conversation about what's actually the natives that was on this land, but you monkey wrenched your white way into being a native yourself. And so you're still trying to, and this is, to me, and I'm long-winded, so I'm trying to wrap it up. Take your time. But that is a way of studying your way into how you can take this money and segue it away from us.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this too, Trouble. Like what they did with those Osage Indians, they set those Osage Indians up in Oklahoma. They set them up on some land that they thought would nobody want. And boy, if that wasn't Jed Clampett and them, they struck oil and they became the richest Native Americans ever. I mean, you have to read. I forgot the name of the book and the movie. But they started killing them off one by one. They started marrying into it so they could be the beneficiaries. And once they had that locked down, they started knocking them off one by one.
Wasn't that the Killers of the Flower Moon?
Killers of the Flower Moon. Now you just said it. Exactly. And their motivation for that was, hey, y'all got more than we got. We baked a cake for y'all, and it turned out to y'all good. What does the Bible say? What you plan for my harm, God meant for good. And they ended up, and the jealousy was there because they were rolling around with Mercedes and Cadillacs, and just top of the line vehicles and minks and things of that nature, and so they found a way to insert themselves in to get their hands on that. And I agree with you totally. They can't figure out how to break themselves off a little piece of this reparations. So this is why, well, we don't owe it. We don't owe it, but we'll study it. We'll continue to study it. It's just crazy. Go ahead, Rolly. You got it.
Thank you, baby. Trouble is always bringing that fire.
Ain't she though? Ain't she?
And so I'm gonna take it even further. The reason why dissertations of documentation is important, and I don't like the fact that they've weaponized studies to become a time waster. I think that is the Pan-African or the Afro Ron Daniels in the Narcan and Cobra view of now wanting to jump in midway to say, hey, we haven't been doing anything, so now we're going to jump in and we want to do studies. In order for the 5 civilized tribes that they keep saying civilized after they were calling them savages, they called them civilized after the white Anglos and the Spaniards and who were on this land who were immigrants but identified as white today. Their ancestral lineage infiltrated into those colonies or tribal tribes because they were getting ready to get kicked out. And they didn't want to be kicked out. So they went ahead and pushed them into those tribal lands. All of a sudden, they're classified as 5 civilized tribes, all the while ostracating the Black indigenous freedmen who now are all on the books of fighting also for reparations. And so I'm going to land that there because that is another show. But I just wanted to give people that piece of follow that rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. The other piece of it is Maureen. Shout out to Maureen and Dr. Shirley Weber, NASD, and as well as CJAC and the people out in California and around the country who have identified lineage. If we didn't have the term lineage being put on the forefront, that would tell you right then and there, the same people who would have done, who did the Indians that the 5 civilized tribes way, we would be facing that same issue if we do not identify who are the descendants in this movement to receive reparations, and how do you quantify? Because see, you can't answer that question and then say we don't need studies. Actually, we need to stop demonizing commission's work and actually identify who are the people. And without that, we can give money to all Black people because that's what Narcan and Cobra want.
Right.
And we don't want that.
No. And I get that. And I know you're trying to you're trying to present both sides of the fence. So let me do something real quick. Let me reset the room. Shout out to Captain on the stage. Give me just a second. I'm going to let you come up off your mic, Captain. I do want to acknowledge the YouTube streets. I ain't mad at y'all. Muffet, you hold it down. George, you're holding it down. Muffet said, once again, opponents will refuse to challenge reparation payments based on the claim that no one alive today has suffered the harm of directly being enslaved. Jews and Japanese were directly affected. Even though the interned Japanese were directly injured, it still took an act of Congress to award them redress. They weren't able to accomplish reparations by lawsuit or any other way. I read an article on the Evanston reparations that Cam Howard was advising the organization that conducted the study and administered the funds. That's all from Muffet on the YouTube streets. George Middleton is stating that no white person in any position of power and authority should have anything to do with determining the process of reparations, in parentheses, for obvious reasons. Here's my point. All that information, there's so many learned individuals, Rella, you, for example, that have all of that, twist and turn information. We don't need the study. We don't, again, and I totally agree with what Trouble said. We've done the work. We've come up with the game plan. They keep coming with something to prevent us from doing what they know they need to do, which is cut the check. And so for them to say study out of their mouth, it's really let us delay this. But let me hear what Captain Broke has to say. Go ahead, Captain Broke. You got it.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate you allowing me to come up here and speak.
Sure.
In a lot of these arguments I hear some of our white counterparts say is that, oh, why do I have to pay for it? This thing happened so long ago. It's not my fault. It happened so long. It's been tight. You guys been tying it up ever since it happened. You hear what I'm saying? This is like probably the longest court case in American history because it was already decided when Abe Lincoln said, we're going to give every free slave 40 acres and a mule. And when he got assassinated, his vice president took that away. Okay, so it was already decided. So, but my thing is that we have to be able to come and actually put something on the table, and because we can talk about it and everything, but like we just talked about the Japanese, these Japanese camps, but we have to go to the government and put something on the table, get those representatives to talk about it. Now, this is my only concern. I'll be honest with you.
Sure.
I really believe, because we represent a large part of the Democratic Party, I really believe our problem would be more of Republicans, right? They always has been the party of no for African Americans, especially today. They don't help African Americans in those in those Republican ran states or cities. They just don't. Anything, even our history, they want to erase our history. You know what I mean? And we have to figure out a way, whether it's through organization or through legislation, that we can actually get some of these things passed, because we can talk about it. But man, guess what? We may not see it in our lifetime. These people, it's like convincing the white folks, like, how much do you pay to me? Like, we giving them the power to say how much. If it was up to them, they probably would just give us a ham sandwich, because it's coming out. They feel like it's coming out their account.
Right.
But we have to literally, and I'll be honest with you, I know there's a lot of crazy stuff that's happening, and people like, F you, even though you brown, you look like me, I don't want you here, this and the third. And they're American born and everything else like that. We have to come together. Obviously, they have to do the research to see what families is back there, which is really hard to do because we took a lot of the white slave owners' names and stuff like that. But a lot of us have been here, okay? And these people that really ask your oppressor for something that they have never given, when most likely never will give, is asinine sometimes, I feel. However, if they can't give it, we need to take it. And then rather if it's through force or maybe even dipping in those markets that we see today on the stock markets that actually built those things up, we need to learn better, faster, and outperform them in so many different ways, as far as like just through books, literature, or whatever it might be. Now I don't want to seem like I'm losing my train of thought, but I had something else powerful to say, but it's okay. Well, I really appreciate you guys allowing me to share this thing. But you made a great point when you mentioned when those Indians got what they got and they started making money, white folks start, I can assume, befriending them, marrying into their families, trying to transfer wealth, just like they do when the NFL player or NBA player get a nice deal. They give them a white woman.
Absolutely.
Transfer wealth, get a divorce.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what you do, Captain. You stay on here, mute your mic, stay on the stage, and we're almost done with this episode. And I'm telling you, William Darity, Kirsten Mullen, they are breaking it down. I mean, if we can't agree with these people after this, I mean, do we really want reparations? If we can't agree, then what's our problem? But let's keep going.
Yeah. Representative Cori Bush introduced a resolution earlier this year that has some very positive features, but it ends up having an endorsement of HR40, without any indication that HR40 should be revised or altered or replaced. And so it's unfortunate that so much attention has been drawn to this single piece of legislation, which is so sorely lacking in both substance and structural soundness.
As we wrap up, would you share with us what it might mean for Black Americans, but also for our society as a whole, if the racial wealth gap was eliminated?
Wealth provides a cushion against uncertainty. You're talking about people having greater access to quality medical care, to legal counsel, the ability to live in a neighborhood with high amenity schools, or to send your child to a high amenity grade school or college. Imagine what our world would have looked like had reparations been paid 5 years before the pandemic. So many people who lost their jobs, and many of them were Black, people working in service industry, in health industry, food service. It would have been a very different outcome, and not just for Black Americans. We're talking about an opportunity for Black people to have full citizenship rights. It's something that Black people have never had. And because we live in a society where money matters, having that asset really makes a difference. You can participate in the public life in a different way. You can support political candidates. You can rally, you can make petitions. There are all kinds of ways that you can make your voice heard legitimately, legally.
Well, see, every time she get to cooking, this thing wants to, she's almost done to every time Kirsten gets to cooking, boy, I tell you this podcast wants to clown. Don't clown me now. Don't do it. Don't do it.
40 should be revised or altered or replaced. And so it's unfortunate.
They're ill. We're talking about an opportunity for Black people to have full citizenship rights. This is something that Black people have never had. And because we live in a society where money matters, having that asset really makes a difference. You can participate in the public life in a different way. You can support political candidates. You can rally, you can make petitions. There are all kinds of ways that you can make your voice heard legitimately, legally, that are afforded when one has wealth. There's also the possibility that individuals could purchase businesses that were already a going concern. One of the things that really matters with business startups is having the opportunity to fail and to try again, to make changes, to learn from your mistakes. This is, something that's just not available for the most part for Black people who want to be entrepreneurs. So, having that wealth really would be a game changer, I think, in many, many ways.
Yeah, I just would like to echo your comment, Kirsten, about the importance of having the material conditions for full citizenship in the United States. That's what elimination of the racial wealth gap would provide. So it would give Black Americans a degree of economic security and a wider range of opportunities than they have ever experienced before. The social benefit would mean that the country has finally addressed an outstanding debt that has been in place for more than 156 years. So it would then be possible to move on as a community as a whole with that debt paid, and with the prospect for having true racial conciliation in the United States.
I was going to say one thing I think, too, would be part of that conciliation is an acknowledgement of our actual history. Mm-hmm. I think part of the difficulty with much of this conversation is we don't know our history. We learned so much while we were researching From Here to Equality and continue to do so. And it's not because we weren't taught history classes, but a lot of this information was just not made available to us. And certainly when we...
so we took history classes.
Right, we took history classes.
But this material
made
was
A's,
not in these history classes.
But this wasn't part of those classes. And I mean, just thinking about how different my own understanding of history would have been if any of my teachers had placed the 40-acre land grants that the emancipated did not receive alongside the 160-acre Homestead Act. I knew all about the Homestead Act. I can remember having exams where I was spilling out information, the Homestead Act, the Morrill Act, Department of Agriculture, but no one talked about that as a decision that the United States had made to advantage one group, white Americans, over blacks. I'm certain my hand would have gone up to ask a question, like, wait a minute, what happened there? But I don't think my teachers were thinking in that way either. I mean, we all had a different kind of understanding of who we imagined we were, what we thought our government had done on our behalf. And, I do think that one of the pluses will be our having the ability to unite around the knowledge and the understanding of who we really are as a people and what we can do together.
Okay, so that really is the end of the of that podcast with Sandy Darity and Kirsten Mullins. The last little bit of it is them saying, thanks for being here and blah blah blah, which is that's all well and good, and but I do like what Kirsten said is she goes, and as you know, I do think that one of the pluses will be having the ability to unite around the knowledge and the understanding of who we really are, all the things we can do together. And if we could all just decide, hey, listen, I mean, I don't know any other experts. And I feel like if there was an expert or experts who were as knowledgeable as Darity and Mullins, I don't think they would be at odds. They may not, they might be like, well, 15.2 trillion or something, but I think you would find that like-mindedness together. So there don't seem to be that many people as well versed on this topic and why the reparations should be paid. So why aren't we rallying behind this? It's organized, it's informative, we know it's well studied, they definitely well documented their position, their findings. Why aren't we moving as a collective to get this part done? It's beyond me. So, Rella, you got your hand up? Well, what's up, girl?
Thank you, Mama.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really is because, again, this information is not, it's not out in the masses in this way. I think the term reparations and the fear-mongering behind who's going to get it and how is it going to get paid drowns out the mere fact that there is a miscarriage of history that is being ignored by the dominant society or mainstream media, and that's being romanticized by the MAGA crowd, the America Spurs, who are the deniers to say, oh, well, we ain't paying reparations, this, that, and the third, when there is a long list, America's history, and you've always seen me post that list of people who were not descendants of slaves getting reparations from the United States.
Yep.
And so I say that Kirsten Mullen, I love her stillness. I love her poise,
yes,
her poise,
indeed,
in the space of telling the story and letting people know that, hey, history has to be a part of the discussion of reparations, right? Because as they admitted, even themselves in their elder age, they had to even take more classes to deep dive into history. And I do the same thing. I don't take classes, but the deep dive, sure, it does open up a door for you to know that actually you can identify the families and the people who would actually get reparations. You actually can identify the story. If research, the same money that was put into archaeological digs, the same money that's put into
researchers that go around the country without no jobs because they're getting funded from the government through contracts to study things in this world and in our country, we would have the same benefits of telling our story. And we are not given that. We are not being healed and repaired in that. And I think that was the reconciliation she was speaking to.
Absolutely. And that's why when the people keep talking about study, like it's that study time's over. Let me shout out the comments on YouTube because they're pretty deep. And then Texas, I see you up here. Captain, I see you got your hand back up. Y'all just stand by real quick. We're going to get right to you. I want to hear what you have to say. So George Milton is saying that 2.7 trillion in income lost because of disparities in wages suffered by African Americans. PDQ, YTF, shout out to you, have to hit pockets. Okay, PD, I hear you. I see it. Okay, you're saying that boycott would change a lot, but it takes unity and determination. There's no doubt about it. And also, PD had said that insanity is to keep voting demo rats. Right? You sound like oh man, right? Understood, PD. And so. George said that in a study by Citigroup, it found that racism costs the U.S. economy $16 trillion. Absolutely. I read that article, George. Absolutely right. And they don't, and they'd rather have that. It costs the economy $16 trillion. And that article went further on to say, to outline how it costs the U.S. economy. White people, for example, who had businesses weren't able to get customers because some Black Americans didn't have any money. Some Black Americans couldn't secure the business services of different organizations because the Black American couldn't become a business in order to be a customer of that white person's business in order to advance it. I mean, I'd rather cut my nose off to spite my face than see you with anything. And it is ridiculous, but they don't mind sending money to the Ukraine. They don't mind paying, reparations to Japanese. They don't mind doing the for the Holocaust. It didn't even happen here. It's ridiculous. Let's see, 13 trillion lost in potential businesses revenue because of discriminatory lending to African American entrepreneurs, with an estimated 6.1 million jobs not generated as a result. Again, that's from George Middleton's making that statement. 2.7 trillion in income lost because of disparities in wages suffered by African Americans, and 218 billion lost over the past 2 decades because of discrimination in providing housing credit. I mean, what else is there to study? There's no need. The study time is over. And again, I think we're doing what we do best as Black people. We keep not coming together in order to get across the finish line. Shout out to One Pap. One Pap, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for pulling up. PDQ say, hey, Mel. All right, DJ, don't support from here to equality since Darity refuses to talk to the Black youth. What? DJ. Now what? See, DJ. Okay, I'm doing fine, DJ. No, we okay, DJ. All right, and then last but not
can I just real fast before you go to the other hand? We shouldn't demand that Darity talk to everybody. I think we should do exactly what Dr. Claude Anderson also painted by saying that we are supposed to be the ones to learn this information and take it to the youth. Darity is giving it to us, which is a generation or 2 generations under him. So if you don't get that the people want to do something that you can pick up the pillar to do, to take up the mantle to do, then you should do it. Because the shoulders of these elders right now is heavy. And I would not put that type of pressure on them when the space that they actually need to be in is in the political, in the governmental space, in the academia space, spreading this message. Right. Now, if you want to take the youth to the Duke University lectures that Darity has, I would say get a bus, get something, and get these kids over there to them lectures
because you can go to them.
So let me ask you this question, Rella. Is this in response to what DJ said about don't support from here to equality?
It was.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah.
It sure was.
Shout out to DJ. DJ.
Shout out to DJ.
Okay, and now let me also, and we love you, DJ. You know we do. And so Muffet also said, Mel, despite all the great work that Darity, Mullen, and others have done, it has not put us 1 inch closer to bridging the gulf on how to get reparations. We are in a position hoping for a goodwill. That's exactly what I'm saying. And so then I think there's some things some housekeeping we need to do. First, we need to, I'm sorry, and I don't want to offend anybody, but if I do, it's not my intention, but we need to tell Ron Davis, sit down, Ron, sit down, because we don't want no more HR40. We don't want another commission. We need to come up with, we need the check. We need the check, period. Thoughts of the week. The study is already done. Shout out to Dr. Claude Anderson, Black Labor, White Wealth. Ain't that it? Study time's over. PDQ says they know we don't need a study. Dr. Anderson did the study already. Ain't that it? And then DJ says, get in that purple chat, y'all. Y'all must not be paying attention to what just transpired. Go on, let them know, DJ. And let me reset the room. Thanks for pulling up. The Only Male Cruz Show on Twitter Spaces. We're on YouTube. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. The YouTube channel is in the Jumbotron. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, share the show. Let me get to the people with the hands up. Brother Muko, shout out to you. Texas, you had your hand up. Let's see what you got to say, sir.
How you doing?
Hey.
How you doing? I got a reparations group on Facebook, Reparations for Black people in the USA.
Mm-hmm.
My first question is, okay, so we're through with the research. You know that even the slave
Your phone's going muffled, honey.
We know even the slave owners got reparations.
Mm-hmm.
So we know, and then I know the Native Americans, they get to go to school for free. They get yearly checks. I think it's yearly, and we're asking for what they call them reparations. I forgot. I can't think of the word, but it's reparations that you pass down to your kids, right? Yeah. We're asking the same thing that the Native Americans got. That's what we need. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I want to know when it's, because I really feel like it's going to get ready to happen. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what else do they need. The federal government could have stepped in and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and do it. Hey, y'all need to come and prove that y'all are descendants from slavery.
Right.
Okay. And so, number one, how are they going to prove that we are descendants of slavery? Because I'm in Texas, and is connected with the stuff that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the 1921,
sure.
And it's a lot of people after the massacre ran to Texas after that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's people from Texas that's descended from that massacre.
Right.
And people in Texas that's descended from the massacre that happened in Texas. So how are they going to prove that we are descended from slavery, Jim Crow, and the massacre? How are they going to prove it?
Okay. So thanks for your question in Texas. I'm glad you wrapped that because your phone started going muffled again. But in this podcast that we listened to, Sandy Darity and them broke it down. The link to the entire podcast is in the description. Also, you can hit that replay gang and hear it as we broke it down. George Middleton is saying our biggest flaw as Black people is our political division, and we are too busy arguing over who's got the best master, i.e. Democrat or Republican. Foolishness, shaking my head, no doubt. We keep sidestepping ourselves. It's ridiculous. Captain, your hand is up. What's up, sir? Unmute your mic, Captain. All right, Rella, what's going on? You got your hand up, Brother Muko. You'll be next. What's going on, Rella?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to give Texas just some kind of meat to chew on.
Mm-hmm.
If he's ever also asked the same question that he's asked, how do we identify the families? You identify the families based on lineage, and in that discussion of lineage, harms are identified, which Kirsten, Mullen, and Darity actually painted by way of of the studies that actually were done, the
Right.
historical data that is written.
Right.
It's just identifying that information. That is how you would identify the families. Also, your last name, or your family's last name, which would be your father and mother's side, as it had changed, it is written in either on census work, it's written on documentation, court paperwork. If you have not heard of Dr. Antoinette Harrell, who was also one of the genealogists, who was called to testify in front of the California task force, and was also featured in the ICE. It was a series that ICE was doing. Not ICE. Oh my God, Vice. I think it's Vice. Am I saying their name right? They featured her in telling the story about how families' records were also sealed in courts documents, and also she tells the story about how the Library of Congress has thousands of records that have not released yet. So it's all about collective effort and your ability to map your family's genealogy. And once you start to do that, the stories will start to unfold, and they will parallel with the events that took place in the states and cities that you mentioned, Texas.
And let me jump in, and let me jump in and say this too for you as well, Texas, and just in general. If we would focus on that, because those are the housekeeping issues that if we can tighten the bow on those, okay, then we can, it will bring us all together. This study it start way from the beginning. And shout out to no taxation. I put it in the Jumbotron. Lineage is proven from birth certificate forward. What box was y'all checking on them government forms? Period, point blank. We don't, and now no taxation is not saying this. I'm saying this. We don't need no study. We don't need a study. Let me see. And back on to our YouTube, George Middleton is saying our allegiance should be to our community, not to the white political parties. And that's another thing. We keep conflating reparations and Republicans and Democrats. Come on, y'all. It's a uniparty. Let's stop playing. So PDFQ is saying that we've been voting Steve Harvey. Oh, PD. So we've been voting. Steve Harvey said, just vote. We're not getting no reparation. I say stop watching Steve, the butt kisser. Oh my God. Whew, it's too much, y'all. Listen, the link is in the description. You guys get an opportunity. Check out the podcast with Kirsten, Mullen, Sandy Darity. This is in their newly revised reparations book that came out last year. This podcast that we listened to today was actually done in December of 2023. But it's their new book came out around that time too, the Black Reparations Project, and in this podcast, Sandy Darity did also mention that there's I forgot the lady's name, but she has in there how the multiple ways that you can go about checking for your lineage and all that. So that's the kind of work we need to be doing. But there's no reason for us to be trying to get behind Ron Daniels, no offense, or anyone else who's saying, yeah, get the study. And one other thing that they highlighted so poignantly is the fact that these people who are pushing for a commission, $172,000 a year to sit on a damn committee, and that's okay with y'all? That's a problem. That's a red flag. Quit playing in our face. Quit playing. So I don't know. I want to thank everybody for pulling up. I want to thank everybody for pulling up, from both the co-host Trouble, the Oracle, One Love, Rella. Yes, Brother Mook, I see you got your hand up. What's up?
Hey, thanks for letting me speak.
Absolutely.
Sorry, couldn't address it when you addressed me. I had a customer in hand, but sure. I just want to say for the space and shout out to everybody in the space. Y'all could be doing anything else, but y'all are spending y'all time right here with the Honorable Miss Mel Cruz and Rella. With Rella, look, I'm gonna find you, girl. You don't bring
We
your
love
tail up
you
here.
with Muko.
You don't
We
worry
love
about.
you,
Don't worry about
Muko.
it.
No, he
We
said
love
he
you.
said this ain't the space for he said this ain't the space for it, one love. This ain't the space.
Right. But I will say this, going to the title and the alignment that's needed. That alignment is needed is that we cannot do this in a system of racism, white supremacy. Forget Brother Muko. It's not about Brother Muko. It's about the evidence. And we are slowly but surely seeing this point arise every day. Every time somebody tries to discount or try to negate system of justice, like, oh, it can never happen, or we ain't gonna have no system guaranteed our safety. Guess what? You're gonna be forced. We're being forced right now to either put up or shut up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And now that alignment has to be all the naysayers. Look, get out of the effing lane. Get out my way so we can do the goddamn job that you're scared to do.
Thank you.
Justice is going to be hard. This is not going to be no easy shit. This ain't going to be no 1, 2, 3. It's all me. No, this is going to be hard to make the system of justice, but it's going to be 100 times harder to maintain it. I was just down at this rally, and I was happy to be down there because I was down there with the people that I'm going to be fighting this system and dismantling this system of racism, white supremacy, and making and maintaining the new compensatory system of justice. These are the people that I'm in these spaces with. Right. That's why I'm excited every time I see y'all doing the space. I'm in this space. Anytime I see y'all meeting up at a place, I'm in that place. You know what I'm saying? Because I understand that the bigger picture is, look, we all need to be familiar with everybody that is going to be maintaining this system of justice, which is us, y'all. You know what I'm saying? I'm just giving, if you didn't know, well, now you do.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? We are going to be the ones doing this system, and we are going to be the ones maintaining it. The alignment has to be set. We have to stop playing with the crime. The crime is race classification, y'all. And I'm sorry, I'm in a big mall. I got a lot of people behind me. You hear a lot of noise, but we have to stop effing around with the crime. The crime is race classification. Racism is practiced by way of race classification. One of the main pieces of proof that you have right now is that the only thing is classified as black in this world right now is a goddamn ink. That's it. We are not classified as nothing. OMB, DEI. So look, we got to really jail the motherfucking collaborators and the white supremacists that have hand in doing what they're doing unapologetically, and it has to be done simultaneously as we're dismantling a system of racism, white supremacy, because I'm not accepting no goddamn reparations check in a system of white supremacy. And what that means, just in case you're not clear about what Brother Muko just said, for the ones that likes to mince words, I'm saying when you cut my check tomorrow, it's a different system. Everybody in the OMD is going to jail. Ooh. Everybody in the DEI is going to jail. Everybody in the court system of racism, white supremacy will be subpoenaed and going to jail. Prison time. This is what this is. Unapologetically. I don't give a fuck if it was my friend. I don't care if it was my homeboy that I knew 10 years ago. You're guilty of collaborating with white supremacy, jail time. You're admitted white supremacist, jail time. You're suspected, and we prove it, jail time, unapologetically. So I'm glad that we're no longer playing with the actual problem or dancing around with the symptoms like this is a prom dance or something. I ain't dancing with no goddamn police killing. I understand that this is racism, white supremacy. And the ones that's practicing it will be punished unapologetically. So run now, but you surely will not be able to hide. I'll land there.
Right on, Brother Muko. You're always bringing the heat. You ain't stepped away from that stove yet because you're always cooking. I do want to draw your attention to the Jumbotron, y'all, in there. This is funded socially. The link there. definitely sign up. It's Black Run. Rella, Trouble, both of y'all know how to do the better promo for it than I do. But I want you to get in there, join Funded Socially. It's an amazing social media app. And this is our effort to get our own and do our own. Also, the YouTube channel is in the Jumbotron. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like this video, share this video, share this Twitter room. Okay. So other than that, if my co-hosts, if y'all have anything else to say, we're going to wrap this space up. I appreciate all the contributions that everybody participating, the questions, the whole 9 yards. Trouble, Rella, any last words for y'all before we get on up out of here?
No, other than you had a good show, Mel. I appreciate you adding me to the co-host spot.
Absolutely.
Love to everybody in the space. Shout out. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
And
Trouble.
I definitely second that, Mel. This was an amazing show as always. We need more and more of it. People need to definitely make sure you are signed up and you are subscribed to the Only Mel Cruz on YouTube and all of the other social media platforms. And if you have not, make sure that you create a Funded Socially profile and page and connect with us on Funded Socially. There's so much work being done. And shout out to Brother Muko for being up here. We want to make sure we definitely fortify all of our descendant businesses that are being developed and create our investment groups so that we can protect our own.
Absolutely.
Peace, love, and reparations. Be great on purpose, y'all.
Yeah, great on purpose. And before we cut out, because we got to, here go DJ. Choo, 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 choo. You're going to get the closing address. DJ, what's up?
I ain't got nothing to say. Hey, how y'all doing, ladies?
Choo, 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 choo. Okay.
You know, I'm in the mix of y'all. Okay, I got to be around my ladies. Hey.
We hear you. We love you, DJ. You know we do. All right, y'all. Well, that's it. That is the podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment because you know I want to hear from you. And until next time, y'all, we will see you when we see you. Welcome to the Only Mel Cruz Show, the We Own Your Head podcast. Discussing topics that make you say, how and where can we improve as a society? From a Black American's perspective. Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Catch us live, be ready to speak. This is a call-in show. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. Let's go to work.